The story reignited the moment people heard the contradictions for themselves, the moment quiet suspicions hardened into public outrage, and the moment a single sentence in a police interview unraveled confidence in an entire timeline. And before we go any further, hit the subscribe button and turn on your notifications so you don't miss the latest updates on this unfolding investigation and every other story we are covering. What began as a contained family dispute has evolved into a sprawling controversy, fueled by conflicting testimonies, missing witnesses, and allegations of a culture that prioritized silence over accountability. The controversy surged back into public view after newly surfaced interview footage revealed stark contradictions in Josh Brown's statements to police. Until that point, many in the public only knew fragments of the story, isolated accounts, whispered concerns, or vague references to boundary issues. But the moment Brown's own words were placed beside testimonies from multiple family members, what emerged was a picture far more complicated than previously understood. The reopened accusations weren't rooted in emotion alone. They were built on inconsistencies that caught investigators, journalists, and viewers off guard. For many, the contradictions signaled that critical details had either been overlooked or outright ignored in the first pass of the investigation. One of the most significant points of contention came from Brown's claim about how often he visited the Lamb home. During his police interview, he stated he had been there just once, an ordinary visit, nothing unusual, nothing inappropriate. But that account clashed directly with statements from several family members who described multiple visits spread over months. According to them, these weren't casual or accidental drop-ins. They were repeated appearances, often unannounced, and almost always centered around interactions with the child at the heart of the allegations. The contrast between once and repeatedly became a foundational fracture that made many question Brown's reliability and the thoroughness of the original police inquiry. What made these visits even more concerning for the family was the lack of consistent adult supervision. Several relatives recalled moments when Brown and the child were alone longer than they felt comfortable with. The mother and father emphasized that they had to monitor interactions closely, and even then, they couldn't always intervene in time. What crystallized their fear was a moment that has now become one of the most discussed elements of the case, a reported instance when the child hid after hearing he had arrived at the house. While some argue that a child hiding could mean anything, shyness, surprise, distraction, others see it as an emotional response that shouldn't be dismissed, especially given the larger context. Then came the allegation that disturbed observers most, what the family described as the recurring unicorn pattern. According to their testimony, Brown would use a unicorn toy as a pretext to enter the child's bedroom, engaging in playtime without an adult present. While some maintain this could have been innocent or misinterpreted, others argue it demonstrated a deliberate and troubling effort to isolate the child. Regardless of interpretation, this detail became central to public concern. It presented the kind of recurring behavior pattern that investigators often treat as a red flag, and that many viewers now believe should have triggered more robust oversight early on. What made matters worse for the credibility of the original investigation was the revelation that a key witness, the nanny, had never been interviewed. She was the person who spent the most time with the child, who observed daily interactions, and who reportedly carried concerns of her own. Yet somehow, she remained outside the investigative process entirely. For many observers, this omission was not just a mistake, it was a breach that fundamentally undermined the procedural integrity of the case. Critics quickly asked, how could one of the most important witnesses be overlooked? And what information might she have provided that could have clarified, confirmed, or contradicted other testimonies? As the public revisited the police interview footage, another troubling moment captured attention: Brown's shifting language regarding a disputed incident. When asked about following the child upstairs, he stated, "I knew she was going up there," a phrase that deeply unsettled viewers. To his defenders, it simply meant awareness of movement in the house. To his critics, it suggested intent. Words matter in investigations, especially when they shift under pressure, and this phrase became a symbol of the ambiguity and unease surrounding the case. Adding to this layered tension were consistent testimonies from multiple family members: Jonathan, Susie, Israel, and longtime housekeeper Sylvia. Their recollections, though delivered at different times and in different contexts, aligned closely on key details: the visits, the patterns, the boundaries crossed, and the emotional behavior of the child. Their unity created a stark contrast to Brown's altered or inconsistent statements. It's this contrast that has fueled much of the renewed scrutiny and amplified calls for deeper investigation. Compounding the controversy is the broader critique that Daystar, the ministry closely connected to the Lamb family, fostered what some describe as a culture of silence. Former employees and insiders argue that financial dependence, loyalty expectations, and fear of professional retaliation shaped how concerns were expressed or suppressed. With livelihoods tied to the ministry, questioning leadership reportedly felt dangerous for some. When allegations surfaced, that pressure system may have influenced who spoke, what was reported, and how far accountability efforts were allowed to go. This environment, critics say, created a perfect storm: missing witnesses, conflicting testimonies, internal pressure, and a lack of transparent investigation. Without independent oversight, people feared consequences. Without consequences, silence spread. And without clarity, rumors filled the gaps. This is why many commentators, journalists, and members of the public continue calling for the case to be reopened, not to punish preemptively, but to ensure that a full and fair review finally takes place. The underlying truth is that unresolved contradictions lie at the heart of this controversy. When witnesses disagree on critical details, when official interviews contain inconsistencies, and when key individuals go unheard, it becomes impossible to trust the integrity of the initial findings. Multiple family members maintain that their memories are consistent and sincere, while Brown continues to deny wrongdoing, calling the accusations misunderstandings or misinterpretations. These opposing narratives create a wide gap that only a thorough, independent investigation can bridge. The absence of the nanny's testimony remains one of the most glaring gaps. In any investigation involving the well-being of a child, the primary caregiver's voice is vital. Without it, the case rests on partial information, making conclusions uncertain and confidence shaky. Until she is interviewed, or until her silence is explained, many will continue to believe the investigation was incomplete. In the end, this controversy is no longer just about one man or one family. It has become an examination of culture, oversight, and accountability in faith-based institutions. The deeper issue is not merely whether a boundary was crossed, but whether an organization structured around loyalty and hierarchy created conditions where truth was harder to access than silence. The public's reaction reflects a broader shift. People want transparency, independent review, and trustworthy handling of serious concerns. As scrutiny intensifies, the need for clarity becomes more urgent. Whether the case is ultimately reopened will depend on law enforcement decisions, new evidence, and public pressure. But one thing is undeniable: unanswered questions don't fade with time, they grow louder. And the longer they remain unresolved, the more they erode trust. What this story reveals is that accountability cannot thrive where silence is rewarded. Institutions must choose transparency over convenience, families must choose honesty over discomfort, and investigations must choose thoroughness over speed. Until those principles are honored, the truth will remain out of reach, and the people involved, especially the child at the center, will carry the weight of uncertainty. This case, with all its contradictions and missing pieces, teaches a clear lesson. When the details don't add up, the only responsible path forward is a fuller search for the truth.